Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I hope Julien woke you up from the digestion and all the nap that's happening after lunch. I will try to make it dynamic as well. We have a shorter session of half an hour where I will be sharing how we try to approach continuous delivery at Dashlane, how we try to be releasing faster and in a better way. But I'll start with the classic question of opening presentation. Who thinks they do continuous delivery today in their company? Raise the hand. Oh, pretty good. Well, I'm happy about this because I think that's very important for the business. And back to what Julien was saying about making an impact. Of course, to make an impact, you need to be able to release faster and, of course, better. So just introducing myself, my name is Frédéric Rivain. I'm the CTO of Dashlane. Who knows about Dashlane? Oh, great. I like it. Thanks a lot, everybody. So we are a password manager. We help you manage your identity, your payment means, your credentials online in a simple and secure way, and hopefully everywhere. To give you a sense of the company, we've been founded 10 years ago, and today we are about 150 employees in Paris, Lisbon, and New York. We have two lines of product, the historical consumer product, and also today an offer for the enterprise. And we are about 10 product and engineering teams. So back to the previous presentation about continuous reteaming. Reteaming at scale is a bit more complicated, but I really like Julien's presentation. So what is it about? The goal of continuous delivery for us is how can we deliver in production in a fast way, reliably, and on demand. Of course, this implies to have a release pipeline that is both automated and industrialized, and it's a lot of work and a lot of effort. I will share a bit of the story. I will go fast with the first step because those are kind of the obvious steps, but there are hopefully a few things that are interesting to you towards the end. And so that works. Before that, giving you a sense of the technical platform at Dashlane, because we have kind of a complexity. We have an Android app, a macOS app, an iOS app, a Windows app, extensions in all the browsers, and unfortunately, all the browsers are not equal. So they are actually real different. A web app, an admin console for the B2B, the Dashlane website. All of this is supported by a semantic engine that's hosted as a service in all the applications, and then our backend with all the web services, the database, and the infrastructure, obviously. So that makes for quite a complicated release pipeline because we don't have one release pipeline, actually, but we have one per platform. All of this started back in 2016. As you can imagine, we're coming from a long, long way away. We had a very old and antique Mercurial versioning system, very fragile, was breaking all the time. We have limited CI, if I don't want to say no CI, very few unit tests on the code base. We had a few QA, because of all those native applications, we had to have a few QA, but they were just doing manual QA, so that was not scalable. No systematic code review, but we had a little thing that was important, is that we already had kind of a DevOps attitude and DevOps spirits in all the teams. So my Android developers were actually building the Android app, but also shipping it, running it in production. So that was a good mindset. So we had to address all of those prerequisites before being able to try and achieve any continuous stuff. So we started by the code base. Migration to Git. We left Mercurial with a lot of happiness and joy and went to Git. We reviewed the branching strategy for each team. And as you can imagine, not all teams need the same branching strategy, so we had to define what we wanted to do. I added a screenshot of the branching of Android. We had to start setting up a real continuous integration. We were on the Atlassian stack, so for us it was Bamboo and Bitbucket as stack. Then moving to the next step, okay, what about code quality? Seems obvious maybe today, but okay, let's have mandatory code review, systematic pull request, multiple reviewers to make sure that any line of code that we ship is reviewed, and that we cannot have people throwing code around without control and without quality, enforced quality. And then a lot of things you can do with automated tooling, so Sonar, linters, and everything. The famous or infamous pyramid of tests. If you don't know about it, that's a classical view of looking at the testing strategy. So same thing, we had to review how we did automation of tests and how we did testing as a whole. So we started from the bottom. Let's have developers actually have unit tests and cover the code base unit tests. And that's a very hard practice to put in place when you have a few years of not doing it. Moving up the pyramid, having integration tests. And then at the top today at Dashlane, in fact, QA are mostly in charge of the functional test and handling the non-regression part of it. A lot of efforts, as you can imagine, a lot of training internally. Our QA were manual QA, they had never actually written code, so we had to teach them how to code and teach them how to maintain and write automated tests, find the right tooling and the right test suite for each platform, plug everything into the CI. Our CI was pretty new, so we tested, experimented, and failed a lot into plugging the whole automated test suite into the CI. And, well, that's well and good, but at the end of the day, you also need to check the results of your tests and make sure that when they fail, you do something about it. So we kept pushing over and over and over, a lot of effort. It's better today. I don't think it's perfect, and there is still a lot of work to do. We still need to invest into our test automation strategy. We need to find the right balance between over-automating and not automating enough, but at least we have a good level of quality gates at each step of our release flow. Once you're in production, it's not the end of the day. You have stuff running, you have your users using your product, you need to monitor your platform, make sure that you are, as a software engineer, in control of what's happening there. You should be proactive. The worst case scenario for me is whenever we get incidents coming from the user support because they were reported by our users and we were not even aware of them. So I want my team to know about the business logs, have technical logs, monitor performance, and all of this. We use two main tools today at Dashlane. On the one hand, Kibana for all the technical part, and we use Tableau for the business perspective. It's good to have dashboards, but if you don't monitor, if you don't have an alerting system, then that's useless. There are too many metrics over there for every person to be aware of what's happening. So we have a lot of alerting in place that warns us when metrics go out of the baselines. And we've put in place as well, as more of a practice, what we call the morning gymnastics. Every morning, someone from the team will look at the metrics, will look at the dashboards, and will proactively try to anticipate what's happening to make sure that we see incidents before they happen. A bit of tooling. For me, you cannot achieve continuous delivery without a stronger tooling. One of them is feature flipping. I don't know if you're familiar with feature flipping, but the essential concept is that you ship code in production, but it's actually hidden behind a feature flip. And then from your back office, from your back end, server side, you can activate the feature or deactivate it. That allows you to separate the act of shipping the code with the act of having the feature live in production. And of course, you can have a lot of segmentation around the feature flipping, so you can have a percentage-based rollout of your feature. You can segment with the beta users, the English users, and so on and so forth. Another tool that's very useful, both for the engineers, but also for product, marketing, business teams, and so on, is the A/B test engine. At Dashlane, we decided to build our own A/B test engine because we wanted it to be very low level, to be really part of the code and available for all the platforms. So we actually reused the core of the feature flipping mechanism because it's essentially the same mechanism of segmenting populations and making features available for a certain set of people. And those two tools are now working in parallel, and we can increment on them in the same way. But those are two core tools for the continuous delivery, so if you don't have them, you should really invest into having those two tools. So what does our release lifecycle look like today? So there are essentially 3 or 4 steps. The first one is, okay, let's ship code. Depending on the platform, we ship at the various frequency. Essentially, our native platforms, iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS, have what we call a release train, so they will ship every 2 weeks. That's a choice. We could go faster. Sometimes Android goes faster. Sometimes Windows goes faster. But when you go too fast, it's also a bit of a bother for the users to have all those apps updating all the time. So we decided to go with a 2-week release train, which is a good compromise between speed and user impact. And then the more of the web part of the stack, they can release every day, depending on the needs. So it's more of an on-demand shipping activity. And we decided as a team not to ship on Fridays, because if you screw things up on Fridays, then you'll have to stay for the weekend or do something about it. So shipping code, act number 1, code goes to production, but in practice, for the users, nobody sees anything. The code is there, but it's hidden. It's behind the feature flip. Oh, sorry, and I skipped step number 2, progressive rollout. The good thing with today's platforms is that you can decide to ship code in a progressive way. So each ecosystem has its own way of doing it, but usually we ship code to 5% of our users, then 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%, that type of progressive rollout, because even if you've tested your code, something can go wrong in production, so we'd rather identify it beforehand and hotfix if needed when there is just 1% of the users impacted. We had a recent incident on I think it was macOS, where Apple kind of changed the signature of the production shipping versus the test shipping, and this we didn't identify because it was different during the testing phase, and fortunately we had just shipped 1% of the users, so we could fix it fast. Once the code is in production for everybody, you can activate the feature to the right people. That's more of a product or business activity, by the way. They have access to the back office, and they will say, okay, now I want to test that feature with 5% of my users. Let's check how it works. Let's check the early user feedback. Let's get in sync with the user support team and the customer service. Are we getting tickets about this and so on? And then in parallel, you can have also A/B test campaigns when you are experimenting with various volumes of your features. So how did it go? Well, I guess the first iterations were pretty painful, essentially because I forced the team to go with it. When I joined the Windows team, for instance, they were shipping every 6 weeks. I told them, guys, now we are going to ship every 2 weeks. You need to find a way to do it, create a sense of urgency. It's going to be a bit painful, but it will force you to invest into making it less painful, smoother, and so on. And there was a lot, as you can imagine, fear of the unknown. Okay, but there's a big change. Are we going to crash everything and so on? But yeah, let's do it. We forced ourselves to do it. We fixed the issues one after the other. We invested a lot of effort doing it. And as we progressed, it became smoother and more easy and so on. The review of the QA process was a big deal at Dashlane. It was very different from having a manual QA team that was just like testing stuff manually on the side, whereas we needed a real strong QA, automated QA approach. But I guess eventually everybody feels way happier. The developers, of course, but also product and business. You've accelerated the delivery. You've made it that engineering is no longer bottleneck about delivery, which is sometimes the case. So that's a great achievement. There are a few things you still need to pay attention to when we do continuous delivery, and I want to share well, yet again, a macOS thing, but macOS is a bit of a complicated platform. Recently, we added a feature in our product that allows you to do a country selection in the VPN. And the marketing sent a marketing campaign, CRM campaign to everybody saying, oh, yeah, we have that cool new feature. But actually, that was the case for Android, iOS, and Windows. But the macOS build had stayed blocked into the Apple submission process. So when you talk about a progressive rollout, feature flipping activation, or A/B test campaign, you really need to pay attention to also what's happening after that, so that marketing is in sync, is right in sync with the delivery pipeline, and do their communication at the right moment. So keep that in mind if you are in that situation. So what's next for us? We're pretty good today. We still have some efforts to do. The first one goes with optimizing the pipeline speed. You want to have it always go faster, of course. How long does it take for you to push code in production? How long does it take you to take a fix from, oh, I have an incident, I need to do a hot fix. What's the smallest ETA for you to have a fix in production? We're always trying to reduce that duration. And it goes with infrastructure, with process, it goes with how do you develop and so on. More end-to-end automation. We have a good enough framework of tests, but that's not enough. We want more regression testing. We want to cover more parts of our stack. Richer CI. We could integrate more stuff into the CI, into the continuous integration. Today, we don't really generate release notes in an automated way. We do it manually, which is a bit of a pain. That's why if you look at the release notes on Android today on Dashlane, it says I think something like bug fixes and improvements, bug fixes and improvements, bug fixes and improvements. So that's not really interesting for our users and neither for us. So we want to do that type of stuff. We want to add security checks inside the CI. We do a lot of security checks manually, but they're not part of the orchestration. We want to include performance testing, but that's of course a difficult challenge into the CI as well. And because we are growing, there's also a challenge of scalability and high availability. We have teams in Paris, like I said. We have teams in New York and Lisbon. How do we make sure that all developers have the same performance of the release pipeline, and we are supporting the fact that we have a distributed development teams? And at the end of the day, the goal for me in terms of continuous delivery is to accelerate always and make sure that we can provide more features and more business value to the user as fast as possible. Don't keep everything stuck into the pipeline because just the production machine is not fast enough to deliver. And I guess that's it. If you want to test Dashlane, you have a nice promo code here for 6 months free of Dashlane, and I encourage you to do it because that's a great tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have plenty of time for questions. I hope we have some. Does anyone have a question? Yeah. Here we go. Can we have sound on the green?
I'll repeat the question.
Oh, doesn't seem.
Actually, I think it depends on the platform, but most of the time we do testing, manual testing way after, that's for sure. Automated test depends. Unit tests, they run the CI, so they run in a continuous fashion. More like functional tests, they tend to happen after. So after code has been reviewed and has been pushed to a higher branch. But I think it kind of depends on the platform, and each platform, Android is a bit different than iOS. They're all a bit different, but most of the time it's unit test in a continuous fashion, like each time you commit, code review then, and then functional testing. That's more like the usual flow.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come with a microphone. I think that's better too. You can give me this.
So when you have a critical bug fix to do in production, you have a fixed delivery timing. How do you manage to have the bug fix going to production very fast if you have to go through all those steps like testing and stuff?
So everything goes through the same pipeline, whether it's a new feature, a big project, or a small fix, a hot fix. Everything needs to go through the same pipeline because this is how you ensure consistency and reliability. But that's why I was mentioning you need that pipeline to be potentially very fast, so that if you have a hot fix that needs to be critical in production, you need to ship it fast. You need to be able to push it through the pipeline as quickly as possible. On the other hand, all the tooling that we have, the progressive rollout, the feature flipping and so on, they allow us to not have a lot of impact when we have an issue in production. Most of the time we can hotfix, and we have time to hotfix actually, because we are in control of what's happening in production. We see issues very early on, and we can react in the right amount of time. And it happens as well that we can, through the feature flipping, roll back. So you started activating a feature, and we realized that there is a problem, so we'll just turn off the feature flip and get back to the previous state. So that gives us more time to hotfix. The only, just an additional comment, the only tricky part is when the marketing team wants to do a big launch, a big splash. For instance, last summer, they wanted to do a big event, a big Dashlane 6 release. So what happened actually is that in the previous months, for quite a while, we started shipping code, we started pushing features in production, but they were all hidden because they wanted to have the wow effect of releasing everything at the same time. And that's an additional risk because even though we will test with your beta users in advance, you won't get the same scale of testing that you can have with normal production rollout. So on the D-Day, we actually just turned on the features from the feature flip. Everything was apparent to all the users, and then we crossed fingers to make sure that everything was going well.
And did everything go well? Or?
Yeah, more or less.
What's the less?
Well, the less is that when you have those type of big releases, you haven't thought of everything, so you still have a few, even like minor updates and tweaks to do on the features, and some bugs, some scalability issues that you didn't anticipate, and so on. So yeah, that's why I'd rather also have a continuous marketing, but that's a different story and a different talk. But having an agile continuous marketing is a big deal, and that's we're not there yet, at least at Dashlane.
Awesome.
How do you deal with on-demand delivery? Like if you want to ship a feature, you simply merge all the dev branch into the production branch, or do you cherry pick just a commit or something?
When I say on demand, for me it's more like a developer on demand, that users have the ability to do whatever they want with their code, and if they want to ship in production right now, they can do it right now. They're not supposed to wait for whatever happens. And then they will choose what's the best solution. So it happens when there are hotfixes mostly that we need to cherry pick, because we already have a beta version already in production, and we need to hotfix both the beta and the production version. So we will cherry pick the code to make sure that we do the right thing. But the on-demand is more, the on-demand part for business and product is more related to feature flip. Because they have the feature flip capabilities, they can decide on demand to activate or not the features.
All right. Frédéric, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been our pleasure.